So I'm going to introduce Akima Thomas, and it's always my pleasure to introduce Akima. Yeah, and great to have her not only hosting with us today, but presenting as well. So Dr. Akima Thomas OBE is a feminist, activist, and comes from a background in nursing and social work. She's the founder and clinical director of Women and Girls Network, a holistic therapeutic service working with women and girls surviving gendered violence. Akima has pioneered working from a trauma-informed approach and has developed a strength-based, non-pathologizing clinical model. Her holistic empowerment recovery model, the HER model, integrating healing of mind, body and spirit. And more recently, Akima has researched women's healing journey, chronicling their strategies of resistance, rebellion and resilience to ensure survival. Thank you as always, Akima.
Thank you, Jo. Okay, let me just get my slides up before I get startled with seeing my face on the screen. Yep, here we go. Oh, please.
Yes, it's worked. Well done, Akima. And thank you for keeping a cool head in amongst the...
I really didn't. But anyway, but look,
Okay.
look at those 48 moons. That's the colours of the moon. It took this woman astrophysicist 10 years to record all of those. So I just want to kind of settle myself with something out of this world. And forgive me for talking about healing the wounded heart. And this is a message to, I guess, that speaks to the profundity of the experiences of violence against women and girls, in terms of injuries that bruise the soul. And so there's something that needs to be held really profoundly. So I don't want that to be obnoxious, but I do want it to be an ambition that we're going to be healing hearts. I understand that maybe what I will share with you is going to hit and move us in different kinds of ways. So I'm just going to read this very quickly to you, which is about brave space. So together we will create brave space because there is no such thing as safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and have caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and to more love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect, but it will always be what we wish it to be. But it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. That's not an apology. That's just saying, about how, it's important that we, share safe space. And I guess I want to start by kind of thinking as well about some of the things that we've heard today as well about it's no accident. It's a deliberate and intention of the state to marginalise, discriminate, and not have equity and freedom and justice for certain groups of people. And I'm going to be talking specifically about Black and minoritised survivors. I usually start with a poem, which is about Black women's experience of, of the impact of abuse. And I felt that I wanted to kind of expand that into a more deliberate understanding about what those mechanisms and how somebody gets marginalised, not pushed into, but dragged into those margins. What does that mean as well? And about how survivors, Black and minoritised survivors, experience the lack of care in the system, and how that system upholds certain parts of the state in terms of the discrimination. And also that has a very long history. Psychiatry is littered, is weaved, is interwoven with the state machinery that kept certain people hostage, kept certain people down. And those compounded experiences for Black and minoritised communities about what it's like to have all of those inequalities experienced throughout their life. And also that we know these kind of things as well, which is really important for us to think about, that the African Caribbean community, my community, always experiences those hard edges of treatment responses. So there's high rates of diagnosis of schizophrenia and overemphasis on medication. Usually sectioning happens, and that's also about higher rates of sectioning, mental health sectioning, and also that's usually alongside police as well. So they're usually involved in that as well. So we've got this, which is about the mad, bad, and also dangerous. And there's not even a pretense as well about trying to access support and care. So all of those things in terms of how trauma is reinforced, and it means those with the greatest need face the most disadvantage. And also how that echoes, how that ripples throughout somebody's life as well. So that there's frequently, a sense that life isn't as it should be, that there isn't that parity, there isn't that security for certain communities. And that has lifelong consequences. I also wanted to kind of think as well about, what it means for Black and minoritised women in terms of that label of mad, and, how we're racialised and stereotyped as being very angry. And of course, that fits very conveniently with diagnoses which have those same criteria of unreasonable anger. And I want to think about that justified anger, and I'll talk to that a bit later as well. And also the same way that the survivors' mental health is weaponized by perpetrators in terms of, and the state just goes along with that. The state also, takes women's children away. The state doesn't support in terms of homelessness. So all of those things. So we can think about that lack of justice in terms of that narrowing of justice for those at that sharp end by both the perpetrator and the state. And I wanted to kind of talk about those experiences of racism and what that means, and those microaggressions that accumulate over our lifetime in terms of those macroaggressions, and how we experience a restriction of access to things. Those unconscious racial biases, we're told, but actually those unconscious racial biases are very conscious for us. And that racial gaslighting, where our realities are distorted, where there isn't the truth, there's somebody is trying to manipulate our reality. And misogynoir, which is about thinking about actually how those two things come together, a hatred of Black people and a hatred of women. And that how that impact of discrimination and equality runs throughout our life. And the danger is about it costs us our life. It's really important things for us to think about. I'm running a bit, but I just really like this this statement, which is about racial abuse pierces your skin, embeds itself inside of you. So it gives to the very kind of profundity of it in terms of what that means, in terms of the danger, what it means in terms of that, the reaction that it creates as well. And usually when we're in a terrible situation, we look to others to confirm, to check out the validity of that experience. And probably for most of us, we're met with either a looking away or a compliance with whatever's been said or whatever's being done, which adds to that sense of humiliation. And those experiences of racism, gets under the skin, but also that it creates a huge reaction in terms of avoidance, in terms of flash forwards, flashbacks, and all of those kind of things. And I say that not just as symptoms, but what I'm trying to convey is the injury that happens as a result. So I'm not describing symptoms or any kind of disorders. I think it's very orderly in terms of us understanding that absolute reaction to the danger of racism. And then also for us in terms of that over visibility, invisibility, wow, the confusion of that all at the same time. And nobody wants to hear our lived experience. Nobody wants to hear the impact of what it's like to have double, triple jeopardy in terms of experiences of VORG, experiences of racism, experiences for me as a lesbian. So all of those things, how do we understand how all of those things put us in a very tight place, and that reductionist view where only one aspect of ourselves is seen and heard. And also then, what do we do about it? And I want to be kind of quite, pragmatic, and I want to be hopeful about this and think about safety in terms of that interruption of harm. I want to think about what spaces look like and how they need to be visible and authentic, and what that survivor leg looks like, and how we meet microaggressions with micro-interventions and a social justice agenda. So I'm realizing I'm kind of lost a bit of time, so I'm going to skip some of those slides, so do forgive me, but something about absolutely about a practical level. It's fine for us to be talking about our experiences, but we need something bigger that holds our understanding of what healing might look like. So I would love to sing this to you. It's a Bob Marley tune, but anyway, get up, stand up for your rights is a really powerful slogan. And I guess it's about, for me as well, it's about resisting despair. Despair means without hope. And I hope, and my intention is to be incredibly hopeful, incredibly optimistic that we can do something. Yes, the master's tools is never going to help us. So how do we start a new kind of thinking? What is that new kind of thinking? Certainly for myself at Women and Girls Network, we are not intending to create functional, beautiful women to re-enter a dysfunctional system. How are we going to support rebellion against the machine? So this is our little model, her holistic empowerment recovery model. I'm going to kind of briefly go through all of those elements. This is just a presentation, and it's got beautiful colors, and I would love it if all survivors went through every single one of those. But some, it might be about the social justice, about having their children taken away. For others, it might be about the pain of losing their community. But that social justice, relational, strengths-based, trauma-informed, recovery-orientated, intersectional, holistic practice. We're doing about 10 minutes. We're incredibly optimistic, as I said, and hopeful. So the first point is about social justice. How do we start thinking about social justice and what that means? It gives us the language of thinking about rights. It gives us the language to think about absolutely no to racism, no to anti-Black sentiment, no to misogyny. It gives us that kind of understanding about equality, about participation, really important as a beginning point for us as well. I always get dismayed when I show this, the level of prevalence globally, different kinds of violences, but we remain on the same. This little island, we have about 3 million per annum of experiences of violence. So important for us to consider that. And I want to bring this as well, which is we can talk about all of the symptoms of post-traumatic injury, but it's this constellation. It's about ostracization from our community. It's about being exhausted, being humiliated. Those are terrible, burdensome things for our soul. It's about that impact that has mind, body, and soul is really important. But more than that, it moves us from our power base. It moves us from being able to be actualized, to have agency, to have power, to have liberty, to have freedom. So when I think of myself as a therapist, these are the things that I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for somebody's liberty and space for action and agency as well. Yes, of course, Maya Angelou. We are thinking about our feminism absolutely right at the heart. It's a powerful medium. We're thinking about things that are going to disrupt harm. We're thinking of things that are going to create healing, which is about having spaces that are loving, that are kind, that are non-hierarchical, that give that intention of care and also about power alongside, not power over, is really important. It's about radical self-love. It's about understanding the roots of experiences of violence. Who causes that? Is that about the lack of sanctions that we have? It's about power. It's about the state. we're talking about relational approach now. You know, if we're thinking about trauma and we're thinking about what causes it, it's individuals, it's the human condition, it's the betrayal of somebody that was very close to somebody. So relational trauma needs a relational approach. That makes every kind of sense, doesn't it? It is going to be about mutuality. It is going to be about all of those things and trying to reverse that catastrophe. Healing spaces were never meant to be dispassionate, cold spaces. They were meant to have integrity. They were meant to have love and warmth and care and support, and for that to be physically felt. To fill the room with that physicality as well. They were meant to offer places of sanctuary and solidarity. I hope that's what we create at Women and Girls Network. And here we are with the antidote, in terms of working with the wounded heart. It is about love as a revolution. Revolutionary love, really important things for us to be thinking about. We don't talk about love in the same way anymore, and maybe we should do. Maybe we need to think about that. Maybe we need to think about that repair can only happen maybe with our care and love. It is about how patriarchy is usually built on places of aggression. So it's really important that we have places of love and consideration. And I mean love in a different kind of way. Is absolutely, he's got sentiment from the heart. It's really important for us. It's got that heartbeat that connects us all. But it's also, and that's about our community, it's about our collective care and responsibility for humanity, for one another, and that nurturing that we should expect. But it's also fierce and bold. It protects survivors from their grief. It understands that grief. It's also fighting for something different. It's also about standing up for equality, for equity, and the protection of rights. Revolutionary love is born of fire, it's defiant, it's a refusal, it's a resistance, is really important. Absolutely elements about ensuring that it's a movement for liberation and freedom. And this is Bell Hooks, and she says, our deepest revolution will come when we understand that love is profoundly political. I've got some other quotes from Bell Hooks. Please read her book on love. It's a very powerful book. And just as I conclude with thinking about, as I think about what relativism does, and about those spaces being reparative, restorative, and it's going to be about that continuity, that consistency, that compassion that's really important about how I'm experienced in those spaces. So, and these are our things. And I want to say this, and I'm going to say it a couple of times. Women never consent to the violence they experience, they always fight back. Absolutely, they never consent. So how do they never consent? What does that mean? And this quote, which is, they whispered to her, you can't withstand the storm. She whispered back, I am the storm. So I just want to kind of affirm survivor strengths, their ability, their tenaciousness, their courage, those things about their ability to withstand and hold dignity in the face of that adversity. They never succumb to the will of perpetrators. We can think about dissociation, and people will want to pathologize those, but wow, what a fantastic creative maneuvering that somebody is able to transcend what is happening. I'm not glorifying that, but I'm just saying there's other ways to think about how survivors are survivors and how they use their agency to withstand the will and the domination of a perpetrator. And I'm using that term about resistance in a really detailed way, in terms of that resistance, that refusal to stand still. And about how they repel and how they make their own activities in terms of they restore their own agency. And it's also about, somebody talked about rage. Rage is really important. Anger is really an important thing. You can't say courage without saying rage. So this starts Me Too movement. That's what this means. You know, that's a conversation between Tarana Burke and a 13-year-old. And what Tarana Burke says is that I wish I'd said to that young woman, that 13-year-old child, me too. And we have that, the beginnings of the rebellion, a whole movement. So there's something about the transformation, there's something about our collective energies, our resistance and our determination to not be thwarted is very powerful. It creates these movements. I'm going to talk a little bit about trauma, and I understand that, you know, trauma is much talked about, and I'm thinking about the different types of trauma. I haven't got time to go through this, but I want to give us a sense of that traumatic fog that is everywhere. It's around climate change, it's around experiences of violence that have happened on that individual level. It's about our experiences from our ancestors and what that brought to us. It's about that present intersectional trauma of racism or sexism, of homophobia, or transphobia. It's about those things, about us being the children of survivors. So really important to think about that traumatic fog and that institutionalized trauma for survivors going through the criminal justice process. So just to think about the complexities of trauma, and I've not even talked about the personal trauma as well, of what perpetrators have done to an individual in terms of thinking about domestic violence, sexual violence, all of those elements. So important that we hold the magnitude of trauma. A little bit of a moan, I'm loving the trauma-informed approach, of course. I'm a feminist. I invented it. But there's something for us about, does it hide more than it reveals, in terms of, you know, what's the relevance for Black women? If we're not thinking about what are those social justice inequities, inequalities, because otherwise it can be quite bland. It's been co-opted by the state, by psychiatrists, still are using these terms, but not working in that way. So something for us about how do we start critiquing that, and how do we start critiquing the trauma industry? What does it mean? How does that interrupt the harm? Very quickly, this is a new cube. Cube has 4 sides, and I guess it's speaking to, this is a 13-sided cube, by the way, but it gives to the intention trauma, and about how we must be working upside down, come from it from very different angles. So I'm going to be talking about, just very briefly, about mending the broken hearts. This is my ambition, my drive, my enthusiasm, my passion is this, which is about the garden of my familiar. So how do we support survivors to come back to their authentic self? Perpetrators want to delete them. So really important that we understand how survivors need to come back to their place of power and authenticity to be who they be. For Black and minoritised survivors, it's really important that we're rooted. This place will unroot us. So how do we get that connection? How do we get that grounded? How do we get our sense of belonging? Where do we belong? What's that ancestral wisdom and knowledge that we need to make visible for us? Where's the magic? Where's the inspiration? Where's the sparkle that means that we feel the life force? How can we do? We can't think about Eurocentric models providing the healing for us. They're not going to do it. They will spend too much time looking backwards at all what's happened. That's a certain way that maybe psychotherapy, psychiatry, you know, wants to work. What's the new pioneering way that we need to, in terms of ancient futures, come back to ourselves with poems, creativity, dance, song, drumming? That connection to the life source is going to be very powerful for us. And also about how we speak truth to power, in terms of making sure that we always are thinking about critical remembering, not just remembering, but also remembering our resistance and our rebellion as we recall our testimony. Yeah, I'm just going to say this, courage, nope, we ain't having it. So starting to think about restorative justice. I love this. Rage becomes her. Important things for us to start thinking about in terms of retribution. We're always taught to be quiet, don't be angry. And I'm saying what happens in the silence is we get disorders put on us. That's what happens in the silence. So important to have voice to fight back. Resilience, yes. I think the survivors I work with, they don't just bounce back. They come back, they're made of iron, they come back with fortitude. Let's think about transilience, about how these individuals are able to transcend the trauma they've experienced. And recovery absolutely is a direction and an ambition. And intersectionality, really important in terms of how we understand the ways that individuals are discriminated. John, I know I'm nearly at time. Have I got 2 minutes left?
I think you could do 5 minutes and we could absorb that, and we'll go straight to Bob.
Oh my gosh, I could have sang a song in that time, but anyway, I'm going to carry on. Thank you, John. But thinking about intersectionality in terms of all of those individuals who are being oppressed, don't choose the ones that you're going to come in line with. How do we become world allies for everyone who are oppressed? It's a holistic way of understanding what needs to happen. It's really important that we start thinking of this not just as a way of categorizing individuals, but this has political intention. It's about social justice. It's about redressing power. It's about thinking about equity. Don't think about equality. Everybody gets the same. No, because not everybody's in the same position. So how do we start understanding who needs what and being really targeted with our resource? And I want to bring this to us as well. Don't start thinking about cultural competency. How can you be competent in my culture? You're not going to do it. So how do we start thinking about cultural humility? It's a little bit of a step back. It's about us looking at through our own lens about our experiences. It's about cultural empathy. It's about cultural connection. It's about cultural safety. It's about inquiry. It's about collaboration. So it's also about ensuring that we're looking at ourselves first before we start looking at others as well. It's that coming together. It's about that social justice and advocacy. Just very briefly again about, about thinking about the profundity of those experiences of injuries that bruise the soul. How does somebody come back from that? What's that new identity? I don't want to over glamorize that, but that could be an exciting part of the work in terms of becoming your true, real, authentic self, and about that support to have that commitment to yourself. Absolutely, you're going to free your mind is for sure. And holism in terms of, and I'm sorry I've had to race through this, but I do want to give us that kind of sense about that spiritual tear and about how important it is to reconnect to self, community, to nature. All of those things in terms of the breath is very important, and what that shock might have done for somebody. And this is Octavia Butler. All that you touch, you change. All that you change touches you. Is a very powerful anecdote. And I hope I'm going to leave you with this, which is, one of my favorites, Angela Davis. I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. So again, I would love to burst into song, but I haven't got a very good voice. But there's something about the call to action. The call to revolution now. You can't go with not hearing that. Something about, every single day. That's how Joe starts this, isn't it? Every single day, in every single way. We can no longer put up with this. And just my final slide, which is about trauma is a process. It's a place of transition and transformation, but also it's a dangerous opportunity. So how do we embrace that and think about what post-traumatic growth might look like? We know that 33% of female GPs are survivors of childhood sexual abuse. What does that mean in terms of also the journeying has given them gifts? And also, I feel very honoured to be part of that movement. And my beautiful wife is in this picture as well. But, those things about creating that revolution. Yes, I'm done. I'm done. Let me say that.
Thank you, Akima. Thank you.
Thank you.